Alright, welcome to the VFX breakdown. So basically I'm going to be taking you through my entire project file from start to finish. And my goal here is to explain to you basically everything that you didn't learn in the tutorials. I'm going to be going really in depth on how I actually achieved this edit and all the little tricks that made it possible. So I'm here in After Effects, and first thing I want to say is definitely go watch the tutorials before watching this, because once you've seen the tutorials, you will understand exactly what we're looking at. All this should make sense because I'm using the same layer colors. I still have the exact same adjustment layers from the tutorial, and it's exactly what we already learned, but now it's time to go more in depth. The first thing you're going to want to do when opening up this project file is actually linking the render that's in the pack to the top layer on the timeline. And this will allow you to scrub the entire timeline, and basically all you're watching is an MP4 video, so you won't need the same fonts and the same plugins as I have. You can just scrub the timeline, and if there's a piece you like let's say you like this animation here, you can now go down into the playhead and you can see exactly how I did it. Also, I'm just going to explain to you what's going on up here in the project panel. So number one is the main comp, number two is the song. Now the song won't be included in the pack just because I don't own the rights to the song, so I can't legally sell the song, but I did leave a link to that in the text file. We have the assets that I used, which I didn't use many assets in this edit. It was only for the outro page. We have number four, which is the solids. So these are mainly the adjustment layers and the black solids, the particles, etc. Number five is the nulls. So you can see each camera, I created a new null. And actually for the text transform layers, I only use one null. So I only use one source file null for every single text layer in this comp. And then number six, we have the outro. So this is everything to do with the outro. We'll get more into that a bit later. Number eight is the website render, and extra assets, you guys won't have that. So let's start off with the website render, because I did say I'm going to include this in the project file. This is basically the render from the website. And if I highlight these layers here, you can see that each letter is its own layer, and basically the way I did this is with the text exploder plugin. You obviously don't need the text exploder plugin to create this, but it's just a lot easier. You can just type the words, click apply, and it will split the words into letters, and then they're all their own individual layers, and I just animated each layer on. So if I press R here, you can see that each layer sort of comes in from outside and they all rotate in their own unique way. And then halfway through, I just added this little adjustment layer, which basically just blurs the text for a little bit. And then we have the same adjustment layers from the main edit. But yeah, that's going over the website render. I just thought I'd include that in the pack. And let's start all the way from the beginning. So if you're opening up this project file, you can probably see straight away that your label colors aren't going to match mine, and that's because label colors are determined on what your personal label colors are. So if I go up here into edit, preferences and labels, I pretty much have one of every color here, and then I just assign them. A lot of people don't like bright colors in After Effects. I find it a lot easier to understand what's going on, and if you saw my tutorials, you'll understand exactly what's going on here. And scrolling up on the timeline, you can see that we're sort of in sections here. So you can see like this is a section here, and then there's another section here, and each section I basically used a new camera with a whole new set of nulls. So I basically broke the edit up into sections. I do this with pretty much most of my edits. Whenever I can cut the camera, I try to cut the camera, because starting in sort of a new section is a lot easier. There's a lot less things to render. So for example, if I come to, let's say, this section here and highlight all the layers, you can see how much After Effects is actually doing here, and it gets really laggy because it has to render all those layers in one sequence. So whenever I can cut the camera and do a transition and start fresh with just one text layer, it just helps rendering, it helps the flow of the edit. So let's start all the way from the start here. Let's go down to these keyframes here. So you guys know about the black solid and the particle world. We learned that in tutorials. We also learned how this camera and all these nulls work. So let's press U and see what's going on here. So this definitely looks different to the tutorials. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to quickly color code this section so it makes a lot more sense, because you're probably looking at this like, how does he even know what's going on? So people always think I'm crazy for color coding everything, but now that I've color coded this, it makes a whole lot more sense. So you can see these green sections here. So this is the first set of keyframes, and then it moves into this animation, then this one, then this one, then this one. And after that green one, I go back down to this first null, and then I start animating these pink keyframes. So now that I've highlighted these, they make a lot more sense. And basically what I'm doing is I'm animating all of them in clean batches like this. And then if anything needs any manipulation, like let's say I want it to rotate before the batch of keyframes start, I'll move some keyframes forward or back in order to get the look that I want. So it's just a lot of trial and error. And if I press Ctrl Z, you can see all these keyframes have been sort of moved just forward or back in a few sections to get the look that I want. But you can also see that my camera has a bunch of random keyframes going on down here. And this is, once again, you'll see this as a theme as we go through this edit, is that anytime I want to animate something that's very specific, maybe I want like a little bit of a shake, or I want the camera to just do something small, I'll go back down to the camera layer and I'll actually animate the keyframes down there, because it's going to give me the most accurate version of those keyframes. Like once you get a lot of nulls deep and you've done all these rotations, when you're moving and rotating in X and Y, there's a good chance that those keyframes don't even line up anymore, and you're moving in X and it's moving in Y, and you just get real deep in nulls. It gets real messy. So that's why I like to come back down to this camera, and you'll see if we go into this next section as well, and I just press U on these keyframes, the camera will also have its own animation, and these green keyframes here is actually a shake. And I'll open up the graph editor and you can see this is the Y position, and it's constantly going up and down, and that's because I created a shake in this part. You can actually see when you're watching the edit that the camera's sort of shaking, but as it's rotating at the same time, you're actually getting a Y, and then it moves into like an X shake. So that was kind of by accident, but I think it turned out pretty cool. One thing I do want to say is that like for every camera animation you see where I'm going like down, across and out, there was like 5 to 10 variations of me doing so many other things and them just not looking good. This method is massively dependent on trial and error. I can't stress to you how many times I spent hours on like some sort of camera animation and it just looked bad and I had to scrap it and start again. So what you see in the main edit as the final product has been through so many iterations to get there. And also I like to use these gold words. They'll kind of just sort of like a hit of dopamine. If all the words were like the same color, it'd be kind of boring. So I try to throw these gold words in there sort of every now and then to make the edit look a little bit more appealing. And also something I wanted to do is, as you can see, this gold word is like rotating and animating on. I also wanted all the gold words to have some sort of something special going on. So when we go up to the next gold word, you can see it also animates. So it was just a nice little theme with the edit, is I was having these gold words every now and then, and those were the ones that were animating on. Those were the ones that were sort of giving you the dopamine as you're watching. And then I transition down, so you can see I do most of my transitions in camera. So if I go down here, you can see the X rotation, and if I open that up, you can see this is the transition where the camera pans down. And then if we go into the next section and we go to the camera, you can see the same X rotation is coming from the top and panning in. So that's sort of how I did pretty much every transition in between each section. So in this section, I actually wanted to do a Z rotation and have the words sort of rotate on with the camera, which gave it a pretty cool look. It goes up, and once again, animating those gold words. And yeah, this is when I do that massive shake. So this is all these green keyframes down here. I'm shaking the camera. You can't really see it when I'm panning through here, but in the main edit, you can sort of see that the camera has a bit of a shake in this part. And let me just give myself more room here. So there isn't really much to dive into in this section. Like for example, these gold words are all animated. And if we open up the transform layer, you can see that it's just a simple rotation. It's exactly what we learned in the tutorial. So I do that with most of the gold words. I just came up with some sort of rotation that I liked. And it kind of gave the edit a bit more flow rather than just words sort of appearing on all the time. You have these gold words every now and then that are animating on and giving the camera a bit more flow. So we finished this section, transition down, and that was probably the best transition of the whole edit, if I'm being honest. And let's open up these camera keyframes. So these ones look a lot more simple. So I think this is where I adapted the style that I taught you in the tutorials. So basically just animating those batches of keyframes. So yeah, not really much to talk about here. This is all just the stuff we learned in the tutorial. So this is just me, once again, lots of trial and error to figure out sort of what rotations and what positions look good when I'm animating all this text on. And if we go down to the camera, we actually don't even have that many keyframes this time. It looks like just a few X and Y rotations to just give the camera a little bit more shake in certain sections. So yeah, I'm gonna scrub through the edit here just to see if there's anything worth talking about. Not really, to be honest. Oh, this part's cool. So this is the first time I actually sort of pushed back in Z position as these words sort of like bounced out, which this part's kind of cool. It sort of breaks the flow of like constant text. All of a sudden it just sort of pops out because there was a gap in the lyrics where I sort of had time to kill. So I just thought of this little pop out animation here to give that some cool flow. And then it transitions to the right here, and that's where it goes into this next section, which this is probably my least favorite section of the edit, just because I think it looks the most stiff. It doesn't flow the best. Yeah, not a big fan of this section. I'll open up the keyframes. I'll see if there's anything worth talking about. Not really. Everything looks pretty standard. By the way, this is like probably 2.5 weeks worth of work. So I'm just like brushing over this like, oh yeah, this is just pretty simple. Like, I spent so long doing all these animations. There's a few things happening down here in the camera. Once again, it's just me sort of pulling the camera further to the left or further to the right to sort of make the words more readable. And even though I did that, you can sort of see some words, like the word back there, you can't really see, and the word the doesn't really get that much screen time there. So this wasn't my favorite section. But then we transition down onto the next section. And this is where the timeline looks a little bit different. So you can see these green layers here. These are basically the solo text layers, because when you see this part here, I actually did all the letters individually. So if I highlight these layers, you can see this is exactly the same as the website render. So I've just done all these layers individually and I've just animated them all on. And it was just to sort of break up the monotony of, you know, just this constant text, and like, it's cool, but nothing's really changing. So this was sort of like a nice little, like, maybe break a flow. And I really like this part where the text sort of like crawls up. So this is what I was talking about in the tutorial, where I always try to animate the camera to the position before the word, because it kind of looks like the text is almost trying to catch up to the camera. You can see here that the camera is almost in this position before the text has even appeared, and then the camera is always moving to the next position almost before the text is, and it just creates for this really cool, like, almost ladder effect. And then the text comes forward here. So if we dive into the keyframes, we can have a look. There's probably not a whole lot interesting going on here. Yeah, just the same. It looks like with these keyframes here, I did some sort of like back and forth with the camera. You can see that's X position. So I'm actually more so just sort of giving the camera a bit more movement as it's climbing up. But apart from that, nothing else really going on. Then we transition to the right into the next section. Looks exactly the same. Now this is a big section, and this is sort of where I discovered that keeping every text layer animated actually gives you a really cool look. So you can see this is the part where like every single text layer is rotating. I did it by accident because I just copied and pasted one of the text layers that already had an animation, and then I forgot to turn it off, and then I wondered why it looked so good, and it was because every text layer was animating. And this is probably the part that I think has the most flow and looks the best. These keyframes down here just look like it's just giving a little bit of Y and Z shake as I'm sort of building backwards with the text. Apart from that, there's not much going on. So if I actually press U on these keyframes, you'll be able to see that you can see every orange layer has its own rotation animation. And like I said, that was by accident, but it was the reason this section probably looked the best in my opinion out of all the sections. And now moving on to the last section and the outro. So you can see the camera, I actually cut the camera. So I'm pretty sure I pressed Control-Shift-D and that cut the camera, but it still kept its parent properties with all these nulls. So these cameras are still parented to those nulls. They need to be, because I'm so far in X, Y, and Z space here that I didn't want to create a whole nother camera and then try and replicate the old properties. If we open up these keyframes, you can see, yeah, all the nulls look pretty standard, the same. Whoa, okay, we got like Lego going on here. I think these yellow keyframes are some sort of X shake, and then these pink keyframes are some sort of Z shake as I'm sort of building backwards. And then if we go down to the camera here, this is probably, I'd say, the most confusing part of the edit, because this is where I got like really good at this style. And although this isn't my favorite section, this is where I definitely went the most in depth. So you can see there's another shake going on here. And I think these pink keyframes, if I open up this graph, you can see that this is actually a shake that I made myself. So when the camera zooms out into this website section, if you're watching the main edit, you can see the camera sort of pulls out and then does like a subtle shake. And that's exactly what these keyframes are. So you can see I did the exact same thing when I transitioned over to this scene. Is I created my own X shake here, which I think is actually, because I'm rotated so far, I think it's actually more so like a diagonal Y shake. But you can see in this null, I created my own shake. And then once again, when it transitions, I created my own shake again. So that's what these keyframes are here, is this, it's just me creating my own shake. But there isn't a whole lot special going on here. So pretty much what I did was I got the properties from this word smile. So I pressed P, and then I pretty much copied those and I pasted it onto this pre-comp, which is this outro page, and this is my recreation page of my website. And you can see this Travis Scott image, I actually just masked it on. So you can see as we're moving back in Z space, the Travis Scott image like slowly masks on. So that's what that is. And then pretty much all these layers, if I just highlight them, you can see pretty much the whole web page has been recreated. And then you can see as soon as we go to this frame, it focuses on the project file. If I go back into the main comp, this is the first frame of that sequence. So I pretty much matched it in this comp. And then when we go to the next section, bang, tutorials. And that's when the next camera comes in, and that's tutorials. And then the last camera zooms in on buy now. So buy now, and I've pretty much just used the black solid and I've feathered it so it draws the focus to the things I want it to focus to, and then the buy now. And the reason why this looks so good is, once again, it's the exact same color correction as we shown in the tutorial. So if I turn it all off, you can see it doesn't really look that good. So that's what a color correction and a texture does, is it sells it so much better. Also, to help with the transition, I also use Twitch. I used to be really good at Twitch back when I made Fortnite montages, but I have no idea how to use the plugin anymore. So I just chucked on a bunch of random settings and just messed with it until it looked good. And that's what gave it that sort of jitter before I did the manual shake keyframes. So I still did my own shake, but the jitter sort of gives it that impact. And then we just have this last comp, which is just this link in bio thing. So the first 3 frames are just frame by frame animation, and then this is where I actually get to an animation. So let's see what I did here. So yeah, animated some letters. You can see the I and the O and the N, and they just sort of animate in. I think this composition's 12 FPS, and then the letters just disappear randomly over the course of 3 frames. So that's pretty much the whole edit, man. I think I covered everything. If there's something you think I might have missed in the VFX breakdown or in the tutorials, or if you just have any questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram. I'm happy to help you out, or you can just join my Discord and at me in my Discord, and I should reply there. Thanks for watching, and once again, thanks for purchasing the My Eyes Masterclass. This is my first ever product, so if you did like it, please let me know in DMs. I'd really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.